All right, welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We have a special guest today. We're going to pivot into an area we're not usually getting into in health and nutrition, but we're joined by Lat Mansour, Dr. Lat Mansour, who is the research lead at Ketone IQ, formerly HVMN, and he's going to remind me what that stands for in a second. But Doc, happy to have you here. Thanks for jumping on.
Thank you for having me. HVMN stands for Health via Modern Nutrition. That's still the company name, but nowadays people know us more as Ketone IQ because that's what our product is. That's what we stand for, an exogenous ketone product, and that's what we're here to talk about.
Love it. Well, I would say that I first got exposed to the idea listening to Ben Greenfield a few years ago, and some of the exogenous ketones that were on the market then, and yours is an evolution over the last few years of that. But would love to get the background, how you got here, how'd you get interested in this stuff? What is the situation with this US SOCOM contract you have? All of that. Just give us a little background so we can dive into the weeds on what exogenous ketones are, how Ketone IQ can help athletes, coaches, regular humans just navigate their world.
Sure. That's gonna take another 2 hours, but I'm just kidding. Ben,
We're like Louis Armstrong here. We got all the time in the world.
Ben has been a great partner, and he's on the forefront of all biohacking stuff. So I'm really grateful to have him as a partner, and him believing in the product as well. So let's talk about me first. Where I come from. I'm from Malaysia originally. I did my undergraduate in biotechnology in the UK at the University of Nottingham. Did my master's in also biotechnology from Columbia University in New York. So that was my first time in the States. Lived there for 2 years and then moved back to Europe. Worked in Germany, Munich, for a year in a pharmaceutical company in clinical trials. And then I got back to school and did my PhD at the University of Oxford in physiology, anatomy, and genetics. My research at that time was specifically looking at the metabolism of the type 2 diabetic heart in hypoxia, which is low oxygen environment. So think about deep sea exploration, think about hiking in high altitudes, and therefore your environment is going to have a lower oxygen saturation, and how your body reacts and how your heart reacts, because as we know, the heart pumps blood to the rest of the body, and your blood carries oxygen, and oxygen is essential for any form of energy production within all your cells. So I went back to Southeast Asia after my PhD. I was a business development director for a diabetes management company. So I was helping them with their diabetes management program because my PhD was specifically in a type 2 diabetic heart. And my interest also stemmed from my family background, where my mom's family has a very high prevalence of diabetes. And my late father died of stroke, and he had a heart attack before that. And because of that amalgamation of genetic factor that I have within me, and selfishly enough, I was given this opportunity to learn about these diseases. I took the step and learned everything that I could on how does these diseases manifest, how do we avoid it, how can we prevent things from happening, how can we deal with the complications, what sort of pharmaceuticals, what sort of lifestyle intervention, and most importantly, what I was really interested in was the root cause and what exactly drove these diseases to appear as well as proliferate. And we're looking at maybe 600 million people affected by diabetes nowadays. And when you have diabetes, you have a significantly higher chance of getting heart attacks and heart failures. So I went back and worked for a year and a half, and then I came out, started my own company in Malaysia for a year and a half, and I got introduced to HVMN in 2019, and they were hiring for a research lead to lead their new project that they just got funded for, which was funded by the US SOCOM, the Special Command, the Military Department of Defense. And basically, it's a $6 million grant or $6 million contract using exogenous ketones to improve and optimize physical and cognitive performance. especially in hypoxia. So given my background and my expertise in metabolism and hypoxia, they thought I was a great candidate, and therefore they flew me out here in San Francisco, offered me the job, and I moved here in August 2019, and been living here since. Throughout the pandemic, that was quite a time of my life because 6 months in, I had very few friends, definitely didn't have any family members here, and everything was locked down. I can't even go back to Malaysia, and that was when I'm like contemplating, did I make the right life choice here? I'm like stuck here. But it turned out fine. I'm really enjoying the job. I'm really enjoying what I do, and I've also been leading all the collaborations with clinicians, universities, researchers all around the world, looking at the effect of Ketone IQ, which is our main product, in all sorts of areas like heart failure, appetite suppression, TBI, traumatic brain injury, Alzheimer's, liver and kidney, colorectal cancer, sleep apnea, you name it. So all these are actually in discussion or running already. But I was also the host of the HVMN podcast until earlier this year, where we took a hiatus because I'm focusing more on, really having some grants around all these research, and then I'll go back to podcasting because I really enjoyed it.
Great. So, all of that, let's dive right into what you've learned through this time. How do ketones as a source of fuel compare to the traditional diet that people are eating? What is the low-hanging fruit 5-second version of what all this means? Because there's probably a small sliver of the world that actually understands what you're about to talk about. So how do you educate while making it accessible?
So I think the first sentence should be then ketones are preferentially taken up by your body, especially by your brain and your heart when it's available. So they have tracked that, and they have proven that, they have established that. And our bodies are very smart. They always choose the path of least resistance. They always choose the most efficient pathway. So if ketones are preferentially taken up, then it only stands to say that it is very efficient. Now, there are more studies afterwards that show that ketones are very efficient, even more efficient than glucose per molecule of oxygen use. It creates more ATP, which is the energy source within the cell. And let's make it clear here that ketone molecules are not a novel molecule. It is not a pharmaceutical. It is not a lab-grown synthetic molecule. It is a molecule that our bodies make. We are naturally designed and programmed to make ketones and to metabolize ketones. So it's already within our genes, within the code to do all of that. And the condition at which you need to be in order to create ketones is that your body needs to have very low sugar, very low glycogen stores, and very low sugar. And that's where you hear the keto diet comes in, or intermittent fasting, because both of those essentially render you in a very ketogenic state where your sugar is low as minimum, and your glycogen stores are gone because you're not replenishing it with glucose, and your insulin is low because insulin sends signal to your liver and stops ketogenesis. Ketogenesis is a process where ketones are produced. So that's where ketones are produced in the liver via fat. So when you are on a ketogenic diet, you are restricted on your carb intake, you have increased fat intake and moderate protein intake. So that increase in fat intake essentially pushed your body into a state where your liver says, okay, I don't have the normal fuel, which is sugar. So I need to use something else, and I can use fat, but I also need ketones. And this is the question where it comes in. It's like, oh, we can burn fat, that's what we want to do. Why do we need ketones then? The answer to that is the blood-brain barrier. Fats do not get past the blood-brain barrier. Think of it as a barrier between, the rest of your body and your brain being a very thin layer of epithelial cells. And big molecules cannot bypass that. So fatty acid is one of the big molecules. So it needs to be broken down and make ketones in the liver and then get transported up into the brain. And when they measure when you're on ketogenic diet or when you take exogenous ketones, and I'll talk about what exogenous ketones are in a bit, but when they measure them, when it's in the body, through functional MRI, they saw an increase in brain activity and then saw an increase in interaction between brain regions. So it shows that your brain is just more active and more cognitively present. In fact, in our $6 million contract with the military, we saw an improvement in reaction time because they do the shoot simulator. And there was also an improvement in vigilance as well as improvement in long-term memory recall, which is very interesting. Now, what I just described about your own body creating your own ketones, that's what we termed endogenous ketones, because endogenous means internal and you make it internally. Exogenous ketones, as how it sounds, is external. So it's an external source of ketones where you can directly drink or eat. Well, so far it's only drinks mainly. You drink it and it increases your blood ketone levels regardless of your physiological state, meaning that you don't have to be fasted, you don't have to be on a keto diet in order to achieve ketosis. And generally, when people talk about ketosis, people refer to the blood ketone levels. Blood ketone levels are being measured via blood, via finger prick, and you have a ketone meter, and it usually runs around 0 to 0.1 if you're not in ketosis, if you're just normally eating glucose and all that. If you are in ketosis, the definition is when your blood ketone levels is greater than 0.5. It is 0.5 or greater millimolar.
So what then is the hack that this is providing, right? What I'm hearing you say is, as hard as it is to get into ketosis naturally and then release those ketones, which can fuel your blood, or excuse me, fuel your body, fuel your brain, give energy, this doesn't need to go through that process, and you're still introducing those into the system, which then makes the system run at a more efficient level. So similar to putting like the higher octane gas in the car without needing it to go down to zero before you refill.
Correct. And as you and I, we talked about earlier before we started recording, is that when you go on a cyclical keto diet, when you go on a keto diet in general, you need a couple of days before your body gets keto adapted, before you get into that ketotic state. And that's because your glycogen needs time to be depleted. This hack, essentially having exogenous ketone, is to bypass that. You don't need to wait a few days. You literally drink it within minutes. I'm talking about 15, 20 minutes. That's when you can feel the subjective difference. You can feel the focus, the mental clarity. A lot of our athletes use it as a pre-workout just to feel that energy, but also have that cognitive benefit. But the more established use case would be for recovery, compounding exercise recovery when they are used post-exercise and before bed. After 3 weeks, they show a huge improvement in power output.
Interesting. So I purposefully haven't tried to use this in the evening because I thought it would have the opposite effect.
Coffee effect. Yeah, because people think about energy, they think about coffee, they think about stimulant, but this is not a stimulant. That's why you can take it before bed, because if you think about caffeine, the mechanism of action is that it blocks a certain receptor to make you not feel tired. But then after it goes off, all this, substances would rush in and then you get the crash, right? The difference is that ketones, they themselves are just source of fuel. It's just having glucose or having protein before bed. Yes, you will have that energetic state, but you're not blocking your brain signal to say that you're tired or like you should go to bed.
Interesting. So the way in which you would describe this then, if people were to use your product or embrace this idea of endogenous ketones in general, how would you map out a day of training as an athlete or a day of work as someone that's got to be in the lab, in your case, when you were doing your studies? Like, right, talk a little bit about look, here's the map I would give you to best utilize this product, both for your enhancing or maximizing your output and
Yeah.
also for recovery.
Yeah. I can use it for in my case, for example, I'll have one shot before a podcast. Like I had one shot right before this, or um any form of activity that you think you will need your brain to be on point, whether it's a podcast, an interview, a presentation. I always use it before those. And then I'll have maybe one or two shots before my workout, depending on how I feel that day. And then I'll have two shots before I go to bed.
And so, what role then is this playing in regards to your traditional nutrition? Meaning, okay, historically, going back to 30 years, it's like, oh, we got a game, you need a carb load, right? And
Yep.
and I don't know if that's accurate anymore. I think people have gotten away from that a little bit. But talk
Yep.
talk talk through that. Like, what's the
Yep.
science say versus the anecdotal history?
Yep, let's talk about the science. So first of all, if you use it before an activity that requires brain power, as I said earlier, they did see that by taking ketones, you are increasing that brain power essentially. Like we said, there's the cognitive benefits. We saw the reaction speed, we saw the vigilance, we saw the memory recall. So that really helps you to focus. If you use it before workout, you essentially having all those benefit, all those cognitive benefit, but the added benefit of extra energy source. And this is especially important for endurance exercise. I think a lot of people, they can feel the difference when they take it before a run, before a cycling, like a race or anything endurance. Because you are, and again, we are not recommending you to fully replace your current nutritional strategy. So if you're taking Morton, you're taking your gels, keep taking those, but stack this on top. Because in the studies, we have seen that when they are stacked with glucose, you are sparing your glycogen. So your glycogen tank depletes slower when you have ketones in your body. And therefore, you will feel like your run, it's easier. And there are some anecdotal examples as well that they experienced lower heart rate while going at the same speed. So it's so much easier for them. And then in terms of recovery, it does increase glycogen resynthesis. So like you said, carb load is because you want to replete all those glycogen that you have spent during your workout. And another study specifically looking at protein synthesis. So mTOR activation, that is leucine, which is an amino acid, leucine-mediated mTOR activation was also increased when you have protein, carbs, and ketones compared to only protein and carbs. Again, you will need those protein and carbs because carbs will increase insulin. Insulin and anabolic is important for recovery. You need protein because protein is the building blocks of those recovery, right? Of muscles, of a lot of biological systems. But ketones somehow give increased signaling for those processes.
Well, it sounds like what you just said is the tendency
Mm.
to embrace one approach wholeheartedly and ignore some of the other ideas is wrong, right? You're saying, no, you need the carbs, you need the proteins, you need the ketones, you need all this. You can't just go full fat adapted ketosis because
Yeah.
then you're missing out on this. So talk a little bit about what does the science say in regards
Yeah.
to, hey,
I,
here's how you should actually be fueling your body on a regular basis.
I think the way we should look at it is individualized and personalized because every person's metabolism is different and unique. And I know some athletes who are fully keto. They are fully keto, type 1 diabetic, um, low carb, and they would go on endurance race just fueled on ketone IQ. And they feel great. But I've got athletes who, if they do not take glucose during that, they will not perform at all. So I think it's very important to realize whether you are more of a carb metabolizer or a fat metabolizer, and then go from there. Because even the proportion, even the ratio of carb to fat intake, if you're an athlete, it will make a difference, right? In your training, on your training days and on your race days. So what I'm saying is that you still need the fundamental. And if you think about it as well, like one shot has 70 calories. If just from a pure energetic point of view, it's not going to last you that long, 70 calories. So you still need you know, your full nutritional strategy in order to maximize your output. What the ketone is doing now is just augmenting that existing nutritional strategy. And when it comes to recovery, you still need building blocks, because if you think about biochemically, amino acids are needed to build proteins. Proteins are needed to build enzymes and hormones, and they all needed to be incorporated to build more muscles, right? You can have ketones. Ketones give you energy, and you need energy to build that muscle. But without the amino acids, where are you going to get the raw materials from? Right. So,
Yeah, no, it's very confusing for the layperson, and I think ultimately when you get into these very specific ideas, right? So exogenous ketones, how does that connect to this whole bigger idea of nutrition? And based on what you just said, right, you can get lost in it. So ultimately, what is the value proposition that, say, the military sees here for their application? Why are they pushing money into this? What are they trying to get out of this? And ultimately, through your work with them, what is the development that you think is going to add value to the next level of nutrition?
so what we have seen is that ketone is definitely more efficient and a very useful fuel. But the reason why the government put money into it is because this technology allows them to bypass that diet, because it is not practical to put all military personnel on a keto diet, right? As I said, because their metabolism may be different. But having a shot that they can carry around and improve their cognition, especially when they have lack of sleep or if they are in sort of high altitude. So we have already seen that in high altitude, the lowered oxygen level decreases cognitive performance. So your brain starts slowing down because there's not enough oxygen. Ketones mitigate that decline. So right now, there is a study that we are running at a university in Belgium. We're looking at recovery, and we're looking at specifically EPO. So erythropoietin, which is a signaling factor that increases red blood cells formation. And increased red blood cells formation means increased carrier of oxygen. And when you have increased oxygen delivery, you have increased performance and recovery.
Right. That's the stuff that the cyclists used to inject themselves with, in theory, allegedly in the Tour de France, correct?
Yes, so that's where the difference comes in. So when you inject EPO directly, it's a much higher supraphysiological level. And that's where it causes a lot of other complications. And that's where blood doping, is considered, and that's why it's banned. Whereas having ketones is essentially trying to optimize your own adaptation to hypoxia. So it's your own secretion of EPO. The ketone itself does not convert to EPO. It does not, change its form into EPO, like ketone is ketone. So what it does, it gives signaling to your body to increase EPO when you exercise.
So you mentioned earlier that you found, when you're talking about individualized nutrition, that type 1 diabetics were able to
Just
sustain
one athlete specifically,
one athlete.
not all type 1 diabetic. Yeah.
No, but let's talk about that for a second, because
Yeah.
in theory, right, if diabetes is about your inability to manage insulin levels, right, because you're not producing it,
Right.
and ultimately, if you dig into the old studies of diabetes when they first discovered it, they would just starve patients. And it's like, okay, is there a connection that, because of that, and now you're providing ketones, which is not adding glucose, that their levels stay consistent for a longer period of time? Can you talk a little bit about what, in theory, this could do in the realm of people that have diabetes that are trying to work out or trying to play sports? Have you seen any connection there?
Actually, I don't have to talk in theory because these studies have been published. So if you look up Dr. Jonathan Little from University of British Columbia, he published a couple of papers now looking at the effect of exogenous ketones in lowering blood glucose, after meal in obese patients and diabetic patients. And right now, I believe that he is running a longer study, a 3-month study, to look at the how long lasting the effect is if you take it every day, and looking at the HbA1c. So what he suspects is that when you have ketones in the body, because it is a more efficient fuel, your body registers it and tells your liver to lower gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis is a process whereby your liver creates glucose molecules from other substrates. And I think this is one thing that a lot of people don't understand or don't know about metabolism, is that metabolism is not one way. It's not a straight line. It's always happening in a flux. Metabolism is broken down into anabolism and catabolism. Anabolism is building and catabolism is breaking down, and it happens simultaneously. So we are always burning glucose, but also making glucose at the same time within our bodies. Same with fats, same with proteins. It's a process that's always going on in a cyclical order. So it's not that we're switching one off and then switching one on. It's a matter of which rate is higher, and therefore creating a net positive or negative effect here. So when that happens, the net increase in glucose or production of glucose goes down, and therefore the overall glucose in the blood also goes down. So that's one. So blood glucose lowering effect. The other effect of exogenous ketone is appetite suppression. So there are 2 papers so far, one in ketone ester showing the effect on ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone. And then the other paper is specifically R13-butanediol, which is the active ingredient in Ketone IQ, showing leptin sensitizing effect. So leptin is a hormone that basically sends signal to your brain saying that you are full, that you feel satiated. And ketones have effect on both of those hormones, which becomes a very powerful appetite suppression product. So we joke around, like, I think recently we've got an ad that says this is like Ozempic in a bottle, but with less side effects, and it's a food product and cheaper. But obviously, I mean, all jokes aside, Ozempic is a very powerful drug, and I don't think ketone suppression would be compared like head to head with the Ozempic. However, if you're looking for something milder and have mild, appetite suppression effect, then you could consider Ketone IQ. In fact, we just signed a partnership with Ideal Protein, who basically has a network of 1,400 clinics all around the country using ketogenic diet for a weight loss protocol. So now they're going to start to incorporate Ketone IQ as part of their protocol because, one, it helps people bridge that transition into a ketogenic diet. As you know, you might go through like fatigue levels, you might go through keto flu, your body may take time to adjust to metabolizing ketones. But when you take exogenous ketones, it has been shown that it increases all the enzymes related to keto metabolism. Therefore, your body is more readily able to metabolize ketones. And then also people who have been on GLP-1, got the weight loss, and then trying to wean off it and not want to stay on the drug for the rest of their lives, they could also use ketones to sort of wean off while having that calorie deficit or having that lower calorie consumption compared to before.
So talk about that bridging mechanism that you just mentioned, for example. So if somebody wanted to get on a traditional ketosis or ketogenic diet and they wanted to use this as a bridge, how would that play out? What would the script look like for that?
Just take one in the morning, or if you want one in the morning, one in the afternoon. That's what we proposed to start with the protocol. Actually, I said one in the morning, one in the afternoon, especially during that slump after lunch slump, and that will give you the energy you need to keep productive during the day, and also making sure that your body knows what ketones are. Like you are introducing ketones to your body will start, producing its own, but the enzyme to metabolize it is already there.
Got it. And in theory, then, instead of having to wait till your glucose zeroes out before it taps into that, you're already feeding it. So it's kind of this slow decline rather than waiting for the
Exactly.
bottom out.
Exactly. You described it very, very nicely. And also, early on, we talked about this as well, as some people may need a higher dose. Some people may need like 2 shots. And the reason being, a lot of these studies are body weight match dose. So the bigger they are, the more dose they use. And usually the dose is 0.3 grams per kilogram of body weight. So if you are, say, 60 kilogram, then you probably need like 20 grams, which is 2 shots of those, because every shot has 10 grams of ketone IQ.
And then
Oh,
you do the
lethal
math on it. So if you're 90 kilograms, you need
You
three
take
shots
three, yeah.
per setting, not for the day. Like
Yeah,
each
yeah,
time you take it.
yeah.
Got it.
Ideally, but especially when it comes to performance, if you want to use it for exercise for performance, use those dosage. But if you're just taking it for energy, for just cognitive benefit, you can take one. So that's what I've been experimenting, because I need at least 2 to 3 for workout. But if I just doing podcasts, for example, 1 shot is more than enough.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, and ultimately the way in which it's now marketed, is there any plan to discuss that in your literature in the way in which you share with people versus, hey, just one of these is going to get it done? How are you guys tackling that? I want to say confusion, but that education piece.
I think a lot of it is via our content. So I talk about this a lot on podcasts. I think that is definitely one of our main channel of education. Another point is with athlete partners, because they themselves obviously have been briefed by me or been experimenting it themselves to see what is their optimal dose. And some of them, just doing 1 dose is perfectly enough. And they saw an improvement in objective measures, either time or distance or recovery scores. And then I asked them, okay, why don't you increase it to 2 doses and then see what you feel, or what you measure? And they were blown away, because they're like, I thought I was already improving. I didn't know I could improve further. So it really comes down to experimentation. And some customers who are not athletes would email us and say that, hey, like, I've taken 1 dose, does nothing. I want my money back. And I think, we give full refund too. Like, but we also tell these people that, okay, how heavy are you and what are you using it for? Let's craft a more personalized protocol for you, for your use case. You're muted.
We're back.
Yes.
So in regards to that, how then, I mean, I know you're getting it out there and that the way in which things are being marketed, right? But if you think about other products that have been developed over the years, and I guess I'm talking myself through this as I'm talking to you, but like Gatorade, right? It's like,
Yeah.
hey, get this bottle and you're going to drink this. Well, you might need two, right? I guess nobody's
Yeah.
getting into that. So it's a similar, there's a trial and error
Yeah.
piece to it. But given the nature of what your product can do and just the idea of ketones in general, both endogenous and exogenous, how do you educate people? Where do you steer them to for, again, the kindergarten version of what we're talking about?
You can go to the website ketone.com. Easy. You get a lot of, like, visuals and citations and all of that. Just go to ketone.com. And the fact that we own ketone.com, that was really great, because, like, when people search about ketones, go right there and get all the information. You got products and all of that. Otherwise, follow Ketone IQ at social media. We do content all the time. I myself, I'm at Lat Mansour, LattMansor, on all social media, especially Instagram. I'm more active on there. And a lot of people, usually would DM or comment questions and whatnot. So
And then let me follow with this. Where are the gaps or the flaws? What have you seen in your research where you thought this, but ultimately this is the response that you got, right? As a scientist, that's part of the process, right? Where
yep,
it's like you're hypothesizing X is going to happen.
yep,
Sometimes it does, sometimes Y has happened. Like, what are some of the
correct.
things you've learned from that standpoint and had to make a pivot?
I think one was a pleasant surprise, and we didn't have to make a pivot, is that when it comes to anaerobic exercise, glucose is always king. Like, you need glucose because glycolysis, that first process of glucose going down into the mitochondria, is oxygen independent, meaning that it does not consume any oxygen. And therefore, it is fast energy, fast ATP production for any anaerobic activities. So when we thought of giving ketones for anaerobic exercise study, we thought that it will make it worse, because if you are making the body consume and metabolize ketones, then you're taking it away from the glucose, which is arguably more efficient. Surprisingly, what we have seen in the final results, when these guys have to do a Wingate test, which means they have to sprint on a bike for 10 seconds all out, and then they rest for 30 seconds, do it 5 times. And some of them puked, some of them, kind of passed out on the floor after, but it worked out. And what we have seen is that when they have ketones in their bodies, and mind you, these guys also had a full breakfast with carbs as well. Um, we saw an increase in power output, in average power, in peak power, in velocity, which means they're not only paddling um, harder, they're paddling faster as well. And then there is a decrease in fatigue index. So in between sets, they measure how tired they are. And there was an improvement in fatigue when they're on Ketone IQ. So we were very surprised by this because we weren't expecting it. And one of the speculation that we thought could be the case is that ketone IQ may have an analgesic effect to that of caffeine, for example. So you don't feel the burn, because the majority of the hardship of doing anaerobic exercise is the burn, is the localized acidic load in the muscle group, and that is what's stopping people from pushing harder. And we feel like it has an analgesic effect on the brain in perceiving that pain, and therefore these people are able to push further.
Fascinating. Thinking that it would do one thing and it actually enhanced this other
Yeah. And
option.
now we have a lot of CrossFit athletes using it. And we all know that CrossFitters are more anaerobic than
Mm.
endurance, although they are generally just really fit people, if you don't break yourself first.
Correct. No, no doubt. I mean, that's the next hack, right? How does Ketone IQ help you from injuring yourself,
Yeah,
especially in that space? Well,
exactly.
this has been fascinating. I appreciate you taking the time to share this. Got to figure out how to apply some of this for myself. Anything specific to larger groups and athletics in general, right? And I used the Gatorade analogy earlier, but you have certain products out there that are marketed for direct, uh for lack of a better word, right? You get these giant coolers of Gatorade out there. It's not
Yeah.
like you guys sell this, but what's the thought and the approach of making this available to larger groups?
We actually just launched a much better tasting one that has caffeine in it. So
Thank
it's a
God.
5 gram instead of 10 grams of ketones with 100 milligram of caffeine from green tea. And we are going in a lot of like 7-Elevens and grocery stores now, so that people, when they look at Celsius, Monsters and whatnot, they can see Ketone IQ shot. It's, caffeine and Ketone IQ that could potentially work synergistically. But again, obviously those you can't take in the late evening because of the caffeine. So that's for the greater public. But in terms of the science, I'm really excited with all these studies on like heart failure. We're starting a study hopefully October in Denmark, to put 250 heart failure patients on ketone IQ because they saw a preliminary study showing improvement in the symptoms. So they're going to be on ketone IQ for 30 days. So that's going to be huge. We've got a TBI grant that we apply with the Naval Health Research Center looking at traumatic brain injury. We've got sleep apnea. 1 billion people worldwide is affected by sleep apnea and snoring and decreased oxygen saturation during sleep, even though they don't know about it. And that increases risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, and even death.
And so the idea is that if you take this before bed, people that have sleep apnea or symptoms similar, this will help them.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna have to try that I don't have sleep apnea, but we'll see how it helps me sleep.
Yeah.
Now that you said
Yeah.
you could take it in the evening, I'm gonna try it out tonight.
Yeah. So my advice is take it right before bed instead of taking an hour before bed. So if I, excuse me, if I take it 1 hour before bed, my brain will be active. So it's not like a stimulant, but it will still, like, if I think about one thing, I'll go into like focus mode. So if I take it right before bed, I can sleep like a baby.
No, that's great. That's a great way to press pause. So appreciate you coming on. Look forward to
Thank you.
following up later in some of these studies.
Yep.
And I'm excited to try this out myself now with this added coaching that I just got.
I'll send you all these papers after this call as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for that.
All right.